I have an article that I wanted to take a look at. The title is Trump Should Be Removed from Office. This is from a Christian website, which is a really, really big deal. Okay, so there's been a lot of impeachment stuff going on. I'm sure most of you guys have been keeping up with the impeachment stuff, or some of you have, some of you haven't. I have been keeping up with the impeachment stuff. Trump has been impeached by the House of Representatives, which means that now it goes to trial pretty much, and it will be decided whether or not he's going to be kicked out of office. The way it's set up in the final trial is the Supreme Court acts as the judges, the Senate acts as the jurors. Like I said, I've never personally been through this process before. I've never seen it play out before, so I'm a little bit unclear on how it works. I'm kind of muddling my way through it. But that's my understanding of it, so just keep a lookout. At this moment, the latest update on this situation is the House voted to impeach him. That means voted to have the trial. And the Senate, like the senators, are majority controlled by Republicans. They said, like, Mitch McConnell's the majority leader in the Senate, which means he's like the Republican and it's controlled by Republicans. He's the leader of the Republicans there. He outright said he's coordinating with Donald Trump and the White House on what they want, how they want this impeachment trial to play out. And Lindsey Graham said he's not going to be an impartial juror, which is actually breaking his oath of office. Like he specifically swears to be an impartial juror in this situation. So really, really fascinating. So the House decided to officially adopt the motions to impeach Trump, which means it goes to trial next. But they didn't pass the paperwork on. They have not passed the paperwork onto the Senate yet, which means the Senate can't hold the trial until they get the paperwork. That was kind of a power move on Nancy Pelosi's part, who is the Democratic majority leader in the House of Representatives. Or no, I'm sorry. She's the Speaker of the House. That's what she is. She's the Speaker of the House, which means she's third in line to be president if everyone else dies. So Trump is president now. If Trump died, then Pence would be president. If Pence also died, then Pelosi would be president. She's number 3. So anyway, it was kind of a power move on her part to refuse to give the paperwork to the Senate for the trial. She basically said, I'm not giving it to you until you guarantee me that we're going to have a fair trial, which I think is fair enough. You know, they specifically said they weren't going to have a fair trial. And she's saying, I want a fair trial or you're not getting the paperwork. So, and it's just going to sit in the news cycle until they agree. Just going to get worse and worse for Donald Trump the longer this drags on. We'll see what happens. Honestly, my suspicion is that he's not going to ever have his impeachment trial. I suspect that they're just not going to pass the paperwork along at all. That's my guess. That this is just going to drag on until his term runs up, which honestly is actually pretty soon. It's not far off. Well, I mean, it's in a year, I think. One year and 1 month. So anyway, so this is the big deal, right? So this is the article I was talking about. Trump should be removed from office. This is from ChristianityToday.com. This is an extreme evangelical website. It's a big deal that these people have turned on Trump at this point. So let me just kind of read the article, hit the major points, and see what it says here. Let's grant this to the president. The Democrats have had it out for him from day one, and therefore nearly everything they do is under a cloud of partisan suspicion. This has led many to suspect not only motives but facts in these recent impeachment hearings. And no, Mr. Trump did not have a serious opportunity to offer his side of the story in the House hearings on impeachment. Yeah, he did, actually. He did have an opportunity. He didn't take that opportunity, but he had it. It was there. They were perfectly willing to have him in. He didn't want to be in there, so Mr. Trump did not have a serious opportunity to offer his side of the story in the House hearings on impeachment. Yes, he did. But the facts in this instance are unambiguous. The President of the United States attempted to use his political power to coerce a foreign leader to harass and discredit one of the President's political opponents. That is not only a violation of the Constitution, more importantly, it is profoundly immoral. Yeah, I can agree with that. It is an immoral thing, and it is unconstitutional. The reason many are not shocked about this is that this president has dumbed down the idea of morality in his administration. Here it goes. This is Christianity ripping into Trump. Ready? He has hired and fired a number of people who are now convicted criminals. That's true. Convicted criminals, like sent to jail over a lot of this stuff. Manafort and Flynn got into a lot of trouble. Like, lots and lots of people in his circle have either gone to jail or being sentenced now. Roger Stone is another one. He's been sentenced, I think, to like a lot of time. He himself admitted to immoral actions in business and his relationships with women, about which he remains proud. Yeah, that's true. His Twitter feed alone, with its habitual string of mischaracterizations, lies, and slanders, is a near-perfect example of a human being who is morally lost and confused. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I'm a little bit unclear on the timeline on this situation, but from my understanding, he used campaign money to pay off a porn star to keep quiet about their relationship. That's a pretty big deal too. And then, it was Stormy Daniels, and then all that stuff came out, and she wrote that book and all that other good junk. So anyway, Trump's evangelical supporters have pointed to his Supreme Court nominees, his defense of religious liberty, and his stewardship of the economy, among other things, as achievements that justify their support of the president. We believe the impeachment hearings have made it absolutely clear, in a way the Mueller investigation did not, that President Trump has abused his authority for personal gain and betrayed his constitutional oath. The impeachment hearings have illuminated the president's moral deficiencies for all to see. This damages the institution of the presidency, damages the reputation of our country, and damages both the spirit and the future of our people. None of the president's positives can balance the moral and political danger we face under a leader of such grossly immoral character. That's fascinating. That is a fascinating take from the evangelical Christian right. I mean, what do you say to all of this? They pointed out there were a lot of upsides for right-wingers and for Christians in America. For example, they got right-wing activist extremist judges on the Supreme Court. And not just in the Supreme Court. They got federal judges put into office. And those are lifetime appointments. Those aren't going away this generation. That's one plus side for right-wingers and for Christians. They got that. They are getting what they want with the economy. What they're doing right now is boosting it short term, but it's going to crash it long term. Just like with Ronald Reagan in the 80s, he did this exact thing. Like, he came up with this, started pushing this big idea of trickle-down economics in the 80s, which led to short-term bursts in the economy, short-term explosions where it just blew up. And they paid for it after a while. Like, it's not a long-term solution, does not work long-term. And we have evidence that trickle-down economics does not work long-term because of Kansas, at the very least. Governor Brownback implemented full-blown trickle-down economics in Kansas, and it bankrupted the state. So, anyways, the economy may look fairly good at this immediate moment based on the stock indexes, but the stocks are really an indicator of how the wealthy are doing in America, not how America is doing. It's because of trickle-down economics. It's because of all the tax cuts and everything. Of course, the giant corporations that practically run the country are doing really well after a bunch of tax breaks. Yeah, did you expect any different? Of course the stock market is up. That money that the extremely rich are getting right now is coming from somewhere. It's not going to the poorest in the country. It exists right now, and it can either go to the middle class or the poor, or it can go to the very, very rich, like filthy rich, millionaires and billionaires. And at this moment, the fact that the stock market is doing just as well as it is an indication of the fact that, along with the fact that the tax breaks were given, it's an indication of the fact that the very rich are taking a lot of the new money being made in the country right now. Let me continue on here. This concern for the character of our national leader is not new in CT, which is Christianity Today again. In 1998, we wrote this. 98, Clinton was president in 1998. The president's failure to tell the truth, even when cornered, rips at the fabric of the nation. This is not a private affair, for above all, social intercourse is built on a presumption of trust. Trust that the milk your grocer sells you is wholesome and pure. Trust that the money you put in your bank can be taken out of the bank. Trust that your babysitter, firefighters, clergy, and ambulance drivers will all do their best. And while politicians are notorious for breaking campaign promises, while in office, they have a fundamental obligation to uphold our trust in them and to live by the law. Bill Clinton was impeached. Of course, a lot of people know Clinton was impeached. And he actually went straight to trial. And he was acquitted in that trial. The Senate acquitted him. He was impeached for lying under oath, I believe. He claimed that he did not have an affair with this person or with that person or whatever, and they impeached him for lying under oath. So there was a lot to the whole situation. There was a lot to it. Generally, I figure it's kind of ridiculous, but like I said, I don't know all of the facts in that whole thing, so I'm just going to keep it shut on that issue. And apparently they also wrote this, CT wrote this. Unsavory dealings and immoral acts by the president and those close to him have rendered this administration morally unable to lead. That was in reference to Bill Clinton, again, in 1998. Unfortunately, the words that we applied to Mr. Clinton 20 years ago apply almost perfectly to our current president. Whether Mr. Trump should be removed from office by the Senate or by popular vote next election, that is a matter of prudential judgment. That he should be removed, we believe, is not a matter of partisan loyalties, but loyalty to the creator of the Ten Commandments. What does that have to do with anything? Whatever. Okay. Hey, I'll take it. You don't like Trump, you want him out of office, I'll take it. Whatever weird, bizarre, stupid reason you have. To the many evangelicals who continue to support Mr. Trump in spite of his blackened moral record, we might say this. Remember who you are and whom you serve. Consider how your justification of Mr. Trump influences your witness to your Lord and Savior. Consider what an unbelieving world will say if you continue to brush off Mr. Trump's immoral words and behavior in the cause of political expediency. If we don't reverse course now, will anyone take anything we say about justice and righteousness with any seriousness for decades to come? Can we say with a straight face that abortion is a great evil that cannot be tolerated, and with the same straight face, say that the bent and broken character of our nation's leader doesn't really matter in the end? That's a very fascinating take, and I agree. That would be hypocrisy. We have reserved judgment on Mr. Trump for years now. Some have criticized us for our reserve. But when it comes to condemning the behavior of another, patient charity must come first. So we have done our best to give evangelical Trump supporters their due, to try to understand their point of view, to see the prudential nature of so many political decisions they may have made regarding Mr. Trump. To use an old cliche, notice I called him Mr. Trump, not President Trump. To use an old cliche, it's time to call a spade, to say that no matter how many hands we win in this political poker game, we are playing with a stacked deck of gross immorality and ethical incompetence. And just when we think it's time to push all our chips to the center of the table, that's when the whole game will come crashing down. It will crash down on the reputation of evangelical religion and on the world's understanding of the gospel, and it will come crashing down on a nation of men and women whose welfare is also our concern. I love it. I love it. This is a fantastic article. I'm so glad that people are starting to see how hypocritical it is to support Donald Trump and also support all of the other ridiculous stuff that they support. The guy is a moral mess. You cannot reasonably justify supporting Trump and also claiming to follow Jesus. Like, They are the antithesis of each other. Jesus' teachings and Donald Trump. You think Donald Trump gives a shit about the Bible? No. It's ridiculous that anybody ever thought the two could work together. So anyway, that's actually a really big deal. The fact that, I mean, this was like news in other outlets. The fact that the evangelical website Christianity Today defected from Trump. That's a really big deal. So I'm glad that this happened, and hopefully you guys found that pretty interesting like I did. If you like what I do and you want to make sure I can continue to do it, you can support me in a few ways. First, you can support me on Patreon. That's probably the best way. But if you want to get something back for your support, you can check out my Teespring. I'm trying to make a shirt design for every cult I've covered. I haven't gotten every one, but I'm working on it. So check it out and see if your cult is up there. Second, you can support me by checking out my game shop. I sell controller, cartridge, and game box stands for every system from the original Nintendo and Sega Game Gear to the Xbox One and Nintendo Switch. So give that a look too. And finally, if you want to support me in some way other than monetarily, you can check out my other YouTube channels. I have a retro game channel where I answer questions like, why does Shy Guy have a mask? And why are CRT TVs the best way to play retro games? I also have the podcast where I talk about stuff I don't feel I can say on a monetized channel. And finally, I have my main channel where I talk about cults. I wish I didn't have to worry about dancing around subjects carefully in the first place, but I chose to do this as a full-time job, so unfortunately I rely on YouTube's AdSense and on the support of patrons to continue doing the work I do. Anyways, check me out in all those places if you haven't already. Thanks for listening, guys.